Okay, the City of Rollingwood Budget Workshop and City Council meeting will come to order on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 6:01 p.m. And we will start with roll call with Ms. Brown.
Present.
Alec Robinson.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson.
Gavin Massingo. Being a quorum present, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, Budget Workshop. We are here for our 4th, 5th, 6th, I can't remember at this point, Budget Workshop. We've made great progress so far, Council, and we will continue that progress this evening. I think last month we made it through our review of all of the expenditures by department, and then we kind of gave you the initial run on our projected revenue estimates. Also laid out all potential exceptional items that are in addition to our base budget last month. Those have laid out before you for 30 days now. So this evening we'll get to wrap up some of our discussion on revenue projections, and then we'll make some kind of straw poll decisions related to the exceptional items to know what to roll into the final budget. And that's kind of what we have in store for this evening. I think we have fine-tuned some of your budget workshop decision documents so that you can kind of keep a running tally of the dollars that you have at your disposal as we go. So with that, we will roll back through. There will be one. I'm going to make a quick stop on our budget action request by department. When we did the original budget layout, when we talked about the general fund and we talked about all of the different departments, I pointed out to you at the time that I zeroed out the reserve officer line item in the police department budget. I've rethought that as we've what? Oh, am I there? Oh, you're watching when I'm. Sorry, I'm trying to get to that budget workshop. That budget. This one? Okay. Yeah, this is in Department 40 under the general fund, and it's line item 510. No, I'm sorry, it's line item. Where is it? Line item 5011, reserve officer pay. So I did reduce it down from 15,000 down to 2,500. I think it's a good idea for us to have some dollars in that account, just in case we need some help. But I think I mentioned to you in some of the discussions I've had, and once I gained a better understanding of how we're using those reserve officers, we're really not using them to their full potential, and so I'm not sure that we need to carry a budget item at 15,000 for that. So anyway, I put 25 back in, just letting you know that. I will say, just put a marker down, I think that we need to do something a little different in the police department. I think we need more kind of boots on the ground at the patrol officer level, but I am not prepared to come to you and tell you that I suggest that we actually increase the salary line item for that department. I mean, the police department accounts for over half of our discretionary budget at this point, so I'm not prepared to suggest that we actually increase the budget. But I do think we need to give some thought to how we operate the police department and look at trying to get some more help kind of at that patrol officer level. So just letting you know that. Wanted to let you know that I put that back in the budget since it's not something that we had since we had already gone through all that. Okay, with that we will move on to what? Revenues. Let's talk about the is this the next sheet in there? I'd like to go to the document titled City of Rollingwood Revenues and No New Revenue and Voter Approval Tax Rates. I want to talk through this document with you a little bit, and it's the document that looks like this, has the highlights on it.
We don't have a document that has that name on it.
It's the
it's just titled Revenue and Expenditures 2023-2024.
It's the third link
Okay.
down. Yeah. So I'm going to tag team with Ashley and Abel to kind of talk through. So this is, I just mentioned our budget action requests, and then at the last meeting we sort of finished that up, and we gave you sort of the initial revenue estimates. This then now brings kind of all of that together in one, to live on one document, right? And so the first three columns there that you see are all of sort of the revenues that you're dealing with. And we sort of rearranged how this was from last year so that it's maybe a little bit easier to read. But the first three columns are basically your revenues that you have to work with. The gray column there is where we think that we're going to end this year with, this revenue year with. The next column is the draft no new revenue rate, and that's the rate that's calculated by Travis, by the Central Appraisal District for us. And that number does include, it is inclusive of the INS, the Interest in Sinking Fund, that was affected by the bond approval. And so that bond approval debt service is rolled into this no new revenue rate. So this is the rate, if you were to adopt that rate, no one would write a check that's any larger than the check that they wrote a year ago. Theoretically, it could vary very slightly from house to house, but in general, that is what the effect would be. The next column is the draft voter approval rate. I know that's not technically the right, it is the legal term that we have to use, but it is the rate that does not require or allow any sort of rollback or petition election to occur. So those are sort of kind of your, think of them as your bookends, right? You could go as low as the no new revenue rate, or you could essentially go as high as the voter approval rate, or you could go anywhere in between those two rates. And those two rates for the no new revenue rate, that's at 0.1767 per $100 valuation, and the draft voter approval revenue rate is 0.1983 per $100 evaluation.
And what are we this year?
And we are currently able, will you hop up? What are we currently at?
I think it's 1790.
0.1786 or 0.1796. 96.
Couldn't read my writing.
It is a little, and I'll let Ashley kind of explain this too. So the general fund, again, that general fund with all of those departments set out up top in the revenues, those are all the revenues that we talked about at the last meeting. And then you get kind of the general fund total, and then all of those other items below, the water, street maintenance, court security, as you recall, those are our other funds, right? And so they kind of live outside of that general fund. But this gives you sort of the reason we took off, we had a total, an all funds total at the bottom, but it was really, it's really disingenuous to try to combine those two because they really live independently. And so it was looking like we were underwater on that sheet when you try to do an all funds total, and that's not accurate because we're not. So that's why we took that off. That middle column that's titled expenditures, that is all the work we did in those first several work group sessions, going through all of the line items, item by item, and this is sort of where all of that comes out. In terms of our projected expenditure, or our budgeted draft expenditures that we've all been through on all those budget action requests. And then those last two columns are where they all kind of come together, right? It's your revenues less your expenditures. And this gives you a sense of, that first column gives you a sense of what your revenues versus expenditures are under a no new revenue rate scenario. And then the last column gives you a sense of what your revenues less expenditures would be under a voter approval rate scenario. Then really you start getting to the decision, the real guts of the decision-making process in that column, or in that little section below, where it gives you the general fund budget balance, right? And so the general fund budget balance, if you adopted a no new revenue rate, would be negative $226,882 under just this budget without any other considerations, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. And then obviously your general fund budget balance under a voter approval rate scenario would be you'd be to the good $105,842. Now, what we do in Rolling Wood that I'm not convinced that all cities do, but I think it's a best practice that everyone should do. And that is, I think it's important to look at what your beginning balance is, or also what we call our general fund projected unexpended balance. So last year we did this budget process, we put all the numbers in, and you get to the end and you might not have bought all the paper clips that we planned for. We might not have had the emergency that we thought we would have, but we budgeted for. We might not have, bought as much paper or paid an extra person for 6 months. So you get to the end of a year and you have unexpended balance. And I think it's a best practice to make sure that you're accounting for that, just like the state does when the comptroller does his beginning revenue estimate, and he gives you what the beginning balance is going to be, what's left in the bank account after the previous fiscal year. So we do that too. And once you take that into account, and you'll recall that for the last many cycles of budget cycles, we have, I think when I started, we had maybe a 2-month reserve balance, and we have very consciously over the last 5 or 6 years been very conscious about trying to move the needle in terms of our reserve balance. And we now have it to a 6-month reserve. And so you have your general fund budget balance under both of those scenarios. Then you have what we believe our unexpended balance will be at the end of the year, which is $1,815,842. And then we back out 6 months worth of reserve, right? And so that's where we get our reserve balance, and that's $1.373391. So that end number is what you actually have for your decision-making process this evening related to exceptional items. And that gives you a discretionary spending dollar amount under the no new revenue rate of $215,000 for exceptional items, or it gives you a $548,000, $293 discretionary spending amount for your exceptional items under the voter approval rate. Now, there is one caveat. Some of the exceptional items that we'll talk about tonight, a few of them, could be, you could spend some dollars out of our unexpended balance that we have in our water fund. You could, on occasion, for a few of those exceptions, because remember, you have very specific limit. You can't spend those dollars on just anything, right? But you can spend them on some things, and there are a few exceptional items that those apply to. So you have our projected unexpended balance in our water fund is $663,000. We have made a slight change to what we've done previously, because those are very specific funds. Standard & Poor's, when we do our S&P rating and when we did our call, they really like to see a reserve also in those accounts, because those are very specific accounts. And when things go south with your water system or your sewer system, they go south quick, and they're expensive. So they like to see a reserve fund there too, so you wouldn't have to pull out of your general fund reserve. So here we have started kind of the first step. We've carried a nice unexpended balance here, and it's sort of counted, but we're actually calling it out now on this document, and you'll see after we get done with the whole budget process, we'll bring back to you your final finance, what do we call it?
The audit.
Our budget process, our finance plan.
The financial report that consolidated.
No, that they will approve in September or October.
The budget review policy.
The budget review, or the finance review policy.
Yes.
You'll see those noted on that review policy. So your unexpended balance, your unexpended projected balance for the water fund is $663,836, less the water fund 6-month reserve of $544. Gives you a discretionary spending decision dollar amount in the water fund specifically of $119,000. We do not need to carry a 6-month reserve in the street fund, and so that's reflected here as the street fund projected unexpended balance, because again, we can only spend those street fund dollars on street-related items. So you have discretionary spending options there at $434,996. And in the wastewater fund, our projected unexpended balance is $671,638, less the 6-month reserve of $473,406, which gives you a discretionary spending option in the wastewater fund of $198,232. So those are at your disposal, and you'll see them reflected on your exceptional item decision sheet. And we'll kind of cover, if we get to an exceptional item that could come out of one of those 3 funds, we'll talk about it at that time. That's lengthy. It's probably more than you all needed, but I like to get it kind of on the record for anybody listening or following along. Any questions on this sheet?
So, thank you, Mayor. I think that was really clear, but just to be clear, Standard & Poor's typically likes the 6-month reserve. That's a Standard & Poor's?
Yes, they like, and for small cities like us, they actually would probably be okay with it being a little bit more than that. They didn't like it at 2 months at all. And as we've talked about in the past, like for a city of Houston or a city of, Austin even, for big cities, it's really kind of the dollar amount that they're looking at. It's easier for us to talk about it in terms of months. If we were to carry a 1 or 2 month reserve, it's not enough dollar amount. So they kind of, when they're looking at small cities like us, they like to, they don't really even refer to it necessarily as a monthly reserve. It's just kind of easier for us to think of it like that. But they like it to see it over $1 million, so that we could actually handle some sort of crisis event, and if we had one. So, but yes, it is them kind of driving that.
Okay.
And it pays for itself too. I mean, I think that's part of why we got the really good rates in the market that we got when we went to the bond. So it does pay dividends, literally. Any other questions?
So I may have missed this explanation, but I'm curious how our draft expenditures for the development services is $300,000, and the revenues is less than $100,000.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So this is an in and out as far as the review fees and things like that go. So I was looking at that too and wondering, that looks like a pretty sizable jump. But now that we're better estimating what we're spending on those reviews, that's why we've increased that expenditure amount. I believe the reason why there's a disparity is I think part of that comes in through the drainage fund. So they pay, the drainage fund is where the drainage reviews come through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they're all reflected here in the expenditures, but the revenues come in the drainage fund. Does that make sense?
The drainage fund's not very high.
The 60,000.
Yeah.
The rest of it.
Still off by 50%.
Sure.
And some of that is not passed through, and I don't know what the salary is. We can go back and look
That's
at
a
that.
portion of it, right?
My impression from looking at this is that we're not charging enough for our building permit fees,
Right.
if we're not covering our expenses.
And I think when you look at it, really none of the general fund ones do, because it's the administration fund is where we collect the property tax, and so a lot of those don't actually cover, but I can see that
Yeah,
one's a pretty
the
large.
Property taxes shouldn't be paying for people building
That
new
department.
houses in Rollingwood.
Sure.
That should be coming from the building permit fees that we're collecting.
Yeah, we're happy to go back and look at that. Abel, do you have any deep thoughts on that?
think a lot of that too is kind of, our philosophy then on the building fees. Should they be covering their reviews or, the entire department? And I think that's something we can talk about as far as our building rates go and our review rates.
Seems to me it should cover the whole department, I would think. I don't think we should, but,
Yeah, I don't really feel like subsidizing that personally.
Some of that department too is more, like she handles zoning code things, so, she works with engineers on more than just reviews. So pretty much any kind of code amendments that come through for the zoning code, that also comes out of that department. So I guess those are kind of more across the board, related, but I can see what you mean. This is a pretty large.
But a 50% discrepancy seems
Sure.
not appropriate.
Yeah, and I think we have it on the list of to-do items to do that.
A building fee.
They've actually been pressing me
study.
to do a building fee study for some time, so I know that's what Nikki's back there thinking. So
Yeah.
we'll keep that on well, it's already on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, other questions? And if not, we will move on to the next worksheet, which is titled Exceptional Item Decision Document. And can we blow that up on the screen a little bit?
Yeah.
And I'll let the queen of our Excel spreadsheets, who's done a phenomenal job on this, by the way, and it was good last year and it's even better this year. But Ashley, since you have put this together and it all feeds in expertly to one another, why don't you walk through them how this works, and then we'll start running through the exceptional items.
Okay, will do. Okay, Michaela's going to pull that a little bit closer so we can see it here. So what we do here is we lay out our exceptional items by department. Generally, all the first ones are those that affect multiple funds. The reason the COLAs are all highlighted there in one color is that we wouldn't generally approve more than one of those. You're going to pick one of those, and so we didn't want to include those in the total calculation of all the items we're bringing forward, because likely only one of those three will be selected. Over here, as we go through and the council's reviewing and discussing items, as we're approving things, we can kind of calculate over here that once something's approved, we're going to be able to see the effect that it has on our beginning balances here at the bottom. And so these are the same numbers that we saw on the last spreadsheet that had the revenue and expenditures and then the amount left for exceptional items. And so those have been populated here. So once something we've decided we want to look at it or possibly approve it, or maybe council just wants to see, what does our ending balance now look like after we've possibly approved that item, we can plug it in here and it will show down here in the second column that says amount remaining after approved items. So for example, say we went with, let me find a good one. I'll just do one of the COLAs. Say we go with a 2% COLA. If we put the full amount, 37,706 here, you can see the effect that has on all the different funds. So it has, sorry, that little screen's in the way over there. It has an effect on our general fund and our water and our wastewater funds. And then so down here, you'll be able to see amount remaining. The general fund amount was lowered by the amount that it would have an impact on that fund, as well as the water and the wastewater funds. And so we're able to kind of plug and play here and see, as y'all are approving items, what it does to our balances.
So yeah, so that's the key to it, is we'll stop after each one and give you a sense of what that's done to that particular availability of funds in those areas. The notes underneath are just a reminder of what you're dealing with in terms of your unexpended balances in water, street, and wastewater. But those end amounts of 119,768, you'll see it's reflected up in that dark box, that you'll have the running total as we go, in case you were to choose to do something out of one of those UB funds. Okay, with that, let's kick off and kind of do some straw polling here on our exceptional items. And spoiler alert, you, in case you're wondering, you have enough dollars here under multiple scenarios to do all of these exceptional fund items. So you probably aren't going to have to make any extremely tough decisions tonight. It'll just be kind of what your preference is. So let's tackle first the all funds exceptional items. Those are the three highlighted above. And I believe, so your total cost at 330, you'll see the sum of all exceptional items at 336,025. That's not included in the COLA. That does not include the COLAs because, again, we don't know which one you're going to choose if you choose any of them. But we will take up kind of those first three to begin with. The all funds 1A, which is the COLA at 1%, is a cost of $19,067. All funds 1B, COLA at 2%, is a $37,706 cost. And the all funds 1C, COLA at 3%, is $55,105. I like to, my recommendation to you is to go with the AF1C, which is the COLA at 3%. I don't think it's, we're not obviously out of the woods yet when it comes to inflationary pressures nationally, although we're trending in the right direction. We're still well above or somewhat above 3%, but it is coming down to those historic averages. You do have the funds available for it, and I think this staff has worked their tail off this last year and probably deserves that recognition through the COLA. Again, my view on the COLA is it's, especially in light of all the discussion about inflation these days, the COLA is really not meant to be a raise per se. It is meant to allow our staff to keep up with the times and the inflationary pressures that are out there. So it's really, in my view, keeping them even to where they've been historically this last year. So with that in mind, I would recommend the 3% COLA to you. It does come out of three different areas of the budget. It comes out of Fund 100 in the general fund. It also does come, a portion of it comes out, a small portion comes out of water and wastewater funds. So if you were to adopt one of these, and again, we'll take a straw poll. This is just for us to know what to put in the final budget. So we can vote, we can not, we can straw poll, whatever. I'll probably go ahead and take the vote, but just so you all know, you're not really taking a vote on the budget. You're just taking a vote on what you want me to put in it for when it comes back to you. So with that, if anyone wants to, we can just do it officially or officially sounding. If somebody wants to make a motion on the 3% COLA, we'll just take a vote on it, and then we'll know where we are.
Can I ask a question before we
Of
have
course,
a motion?
of course.
So, can you remind us what we did the last couple of years on that?
Last year, inflation was at a historic record high at 8%. Well, not historic. In recent memory, historic. It was at around 8%, so we did a 4% last year. I believe that's right.
4%.
Yeah, we did a
That's
4%
correct.
last year.
I think maybe 2 the year
And the year before that, we did a 2.
Okay.
So. And we, in my mind, and this is very unofficial, but what I've always suggested and recommended is basically reflective of where the current or where inflation has sort of been and is projected to be,
Right.
last 6 months and the next 6 months.
Which is why I was asking, because it's been higher than 3%.
True.
And if we only did 4% last year and inflation was 8% last year, it's almost like 3% is not really enough.
Yeah,
Well-
and on that note, it's easy for you to know what a 4% would be, because you would just add the 3 and the 1, and that would, so it would be, 75,000 roughly, 74,000. And I'm open to that too, whatever you guys want to do.
So I certainly don't want to be the killjoy to Sarah's party here, but I believe I was just watching, luckily America has the lowest inflation rate of, like Europe is getting killed a lot worse and stuff like that. if I'm recalling correctly, we're currently at 3.2 and trending down. So that's based on my recollection of what I saw on BBC News as I was getting ready to come here. But that may not be 100% correct, but anyway.
And I don't speak, I certainly don't speak for all the staff, but I would suspect, I would hope that they are appreciative of you having a debate between 3 and 4 regardless, so.
Right.
So I'm open to whatever you guys want to do and however you want to do it.
Just,
Yes, ma'am.
in the nature of a straw poll, I'm good at 3% or something higher. And I think, once we've discussed the other exception items, I think we can do maybe another point higher on the COLA and still have a very reasonable end impact on the tax rate, the way I'm looking
I
at it.
agree.
And where I'm going there, where I want to have some discussion is on the pavement repairs and
Yes.
whether that can come out of the street fund. And if that does it, then I
Yes.
think we can come in with covering the new bonds, covering 4%, covering our exception items, and still be well under the voter approval rate.
Yes.
And we're closer on the end to the no new revenue rate.
You've added to my spoiler alert, so
Okay.
that was yes, all of what you just said. So let's do this. I tell you what, let's.
Can we add in the 3% for now and then come back?
We can't-
After we
we-
go
That's what
through
I think.
everything else?
We can do that. We can also do the 3 and the 4 to leave them all in, and then go take out the however you want to do it.
Well, I wouldn't take out
Okay, let's
other
do the
ones
3.
just yet, just
Okay, let's do the
Add
3,
it
and then
in the
we'll
3 and
circle
see
back
where
to
we're
the
at.
1. Okay.
And one thing I want to say is that I really, really appreciate all the hard work of staff in getting the budget expenditures at or below where they are currently, where that's possible. I really, really appreciate that. So that's part of what makes this work as well.
It's like I set you up for that because it's going to help me next year when I tell them to do that across the board cut. And I think, remember, it could come back and help you in the end.
Well, the other thing I'm looking at, and what's in the back of my mind, is when we get to the rest of the bonds, we want to be at a rate that is not a struggle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, so let's start with a 3% COLA. We'll kind of take a straw poll. Ms. Brown, you good with 3%?
I'm good.
Ms. Robinson?
Yeah, I'm good with 3, but, want to see the rest of how this.
Sure, yeah,
falls.
we will. And this is all straw poll, so we can all go back and adjust these numbers. But Phil, you good with that?
Yes, sir.
Sarah? Okay. So let's put, and then watch this go. Watch this. You got to
What is-
watch this. Watch this. It's great.
What is stay the 16?
We've already done a trial run, so I know it works.
So now that has been reflected down here in your amount remaining after approved.
Can you blow that up a little bit? I'm blind.
I don't know how to get it and where we can see all the. Are you okay if it cuts off on the
Yeah, I'm
side
okay
over
with that.
here?
Cuts
Okay.
off.
That's our new amount remaining.
There you go. So your new amount remaining, the general fund is 174. Here, you read those numbers. I'm
So,
literally blind.
so at the no new revenue rate, it's 174,210. At the voter approval rate, that's 506,934. Water fund is now at 112,895. Street department has not changed, and the wastewater fund amount available is 191,359.
Okay, so we have that, and with that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is all funds. Number 3, this is the plat research and incorporation in the GIS map. This is a small amount of $12,000, and it comes out of both water and wastewater. And this is kind of a project that Ashley and I stumbled upon in working through some of our other issues that I'm drawing a blank on what it was at the time. But it came to light that it's a very reasonable fee, with, who is it that did it?
WSB.
The WSB
Engineering.
did for us, to really, to do a full plat research, and incorporation of all of that information into our GIS system for, and it's water and wastewater related, so we can take it out of those funds, which is always good too. Doesn't do anything to your general fund.
And those are more than just plats we have here. We do have some on file, but generally they're all recorded at the county, and so this includes them pulling all that research. It's it'd be a lot of work on staff, and it's very reasonable to have them help us with this.
We actually stumbled upon it because they did some of this work for us, and then it came back and the invoice was super reasonable, and we were like, "Can you do that for everything?" They're like, "Yeah, we do it. We're down there all the time." So this is what came out of that. So if you're good, Ms. Brown, with that one,
I'm good on 8F-3.
all right. Mr. Robinson, are you good?
Good.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
Sarah?
Yep. And have they updated the problems that we had with the GIS that were identified already?
They're working on it.
They're working on
I
it.
don't know if it's been completed yet. I'll double check though.
Okay. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Can you make a note of that?
You can use this 12 grand to spur them to action on that.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Wait, here you go. Yeah, explain why there's no AF2, and Ashley's going to remind you why.
So AF2 was the wood chipper. That was the one that we ended up being able to get that grant through CapCog for $25,000 for the chipper. So we originally had it in here. One of the stipulations on that grant is that it is spent in this fiscal year, so it actually needs to be purchased by the end of August. So we did not have time to put this in next year's budget. So what we did is we still, for any of the amount expended out of city funds, we lowered our unexpended balance by that amount. So it's effectively the same as if we would have had it in here, but we went ahead and took it out of here because it will be purchased already before we get to the new fiscal year.
The end of August, the end of September?
They need it purchased by end of August, and then I think we have to have them all of our documentation by September. So it was a very
Okay.
quick turnaround,
Okay.
but it will still be in this year.
We had to sort of scramble to, and you all still, on the regular agenda tonight, you'll have the opportunity to approve that. If you didn't, then we'll unwind all that. But assuming that you would, because we have a free $25,000, I couldn't think of a reason why we wouldn't do that. So, but it is a wash because we've already taken it out of the UB here. Okay, with that, the next one is the control network survey. You already approved that through council action previously, so it's already accounted for.
A quick note
Oh,
on
yeah,
that
go
one.
ahead.
We are still working, and we're almost, I think, hopefully to a conclusion between the city engineer, who's already done some surveying in conjunction with the water system upgrades. They do think there will be some overlap that would hopefully then lower this amount. So this amount was going to be for ATS to come in and do all the surveying of all the manholes. We already have some of that data, so they won't have to do it all. So I don't know yet how much it's going to drop that, but we won't be signing that agreement until we have that final number, and it will definitely be lower than 25,000.
Okay, and that gets us to exceptional item 100-30-1, which is pavement repairs and improvements. And this is the one that I brought to you suggesting that we set aside $200,000. We approved dollars, you all approved last year, some monies to do a street, a pavement survey that is being conducted currently. We should have the results back sometime soon, and you'll see it on an agenda near you in the next month or two, probably. This is in anticipation of that report coming back, as we've talked about before, to start trying to chip away at some street maintenance, or some actual street maintenance and repair, true repair and repaving a little bit at a time. I don't know that this is going to be enough. I do suspect, though, that we will, I know that when we start the water projects around. There will be street repairs that would be, it would be nice for us to do some of the street repaving after the street has been cut up and the water lines have been replaced and that sort of thing.
And Google's gone in?
And Google, yes, and we could go over whatever Google has done as well. So this is just a modest amount to sort of budget for that activity. I don't know if it's gonna even remotely be enough. I don't know how much $200,000 gets us in terms of paving. But I think it's a good practice for us to start setting aside some of those dollars so that we're sort of reminded we need to go be doing that sort of thing. To your question earlier, Ms. Brown, yes, that $200,000 is absolutely acceptable to come out of the street fund unexpended balance. I will say this. You might want to keep that unexpended balance, and here's why. We did have them we had K-Freeze do just a back of the napkin sort of estimate that I promised not to hold them to, so don't quote me on it. But, I mean, we could be looking at street repaving costs just over the projects that are on the bonds at around $1 million, $1.5 million type commitment. Obviously, we don't have the money to do that, so we'll have to have a discussion at some point of, do we want to do any of that, and if so, where does that overlap with our street, with our pavement assessment that we've done? Where can we be smart and efficient with our dollars? So those discussions will come at some point, and in my mind, it wouldn't be bad to have $200,000 out of the general fund, and know that we also have this other $400,000 in unexpended balance. So we would have $600,000 to do some significant repaving if we needed to. We can spend some of the bond funds too, but I don't want to overcommit bond funds because those are really, if it's part of the project, and then we could justify doing that, but really that's for the pipes in the ground. So I don't want to overcommit us to those dollars. So. But I'm kind of agnostic on it too. Yes, ma'am.
Here's my thought on it. It looks, and Abe, tell me if this is right. It looks like we're getting about $148,000 a year from the street tax.
That's about right.
And so the way I'm looking at it is, one, I'm not sure we could spend $200,000 on paving this upcoming fiscal year, because we're not gonna have the water project done.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna have, I don't think we could spend more than that.
Right.
We might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs done. It'd be nice to get those repaved. But if we are spending $200,000 and we're getting $150,000, then the net impact on the fund would be about $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could do something, make a commitment, instead of $200,000, say $150,000, and that's going to be, we'll recoup that through
Right.
the street tax. So it's a net in my view.
Yeah, you and I are really thinking along the same lines. In my opinion, we need to start. And again, it doesn't have to, kind of to your point, I'm not saying that it needs to be every single year, but every year or two, in my opinion, if there's 150 coming in for streets, there needs to be 150 going out, or 300 going out. If that's every year or two.
But yeah.
I agree.
And I was looking at it, are we really gonna spend that much? We didn't spend that much this last year. But-
No, and we haven't ever, which is why you have a $430,000
Right,
unexpended balance that can only be spent on streets.
yeah.
So.
So that's my ballpark.
And,
I think-
and that's where I have been, and then sometimes I lay awake and I think, well, maybe it's smarter to just let it build up to $1 million, and then I go both ways. I don't know which one's better, but I think it's smarter to plan for it, prioritize it, and then start chipping away at it.
Well, and I'm looking at it more from the side of, where do we, until we get the survey, we don't know exactly where we need it. But the thing that occurs to me is that if we're gonna do the water project in the cul-de-sacs this first,
Right.
then we ought to repave that if that's needed there. And that's the only real project I know that we might have this fiscal year for streets, so.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm fine with dropping that to
That
150.
we appropriate it doesn't mean we
Yeah.
have to spend it.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I'm fine taking that to 150. Is
Are we talking about keeping it out of the general fund? I didn't follow that.
Okay, we get revenues in from,
Mhm.
from the street tax,
Mhm.
$150,000 a year. This 434 in the street fund, those all go into the street fund.
Mhm.
And so the 200,000 that would be an expenditure here, if we appropriate that amount, we can appropriate it out of the street fund as opposed to the tax rate.
Yeah. I like that.
That's what I'm saying. And so 150,000 out from the street fund, we get 150,000 back in at the end of the fiscal year, where we are today. That's what I'm saying. And I don't see another project on the table now that we know we need it for, that we know we need more than
right.
that ballpark amount. So I don't see, until we get the survey in, then we can
Right.
look at it again and see where we are on the budget, but that's where I would go at this point.
And my only point in taking it out of the general fund as opposed to the street fund, because you're 100% correct in how you've described that in and out. My only point is if you took it out of, if you budgeted it from general fund, that would give you, because you are going to have that 150 come in, and it wouldn't be a terrible thing to have to allocate another 100, 150, 200 out of the general fund to help build that street fund 301 too. Because I do think that the costs are going to be surprising to us when we get the estimate ultimately. But we can also, I think you're also probably right that that's probably not anything that happens this year. So,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that we won't have done this, we won't have completed the water fund or the Google fiber, maybe the Google fiber this next fiscal year, but we won't repay until the water project's done. So I'm seeing that a couple of years out,
yeah.
the big number.
Okay, so what's y'all's collective wisdom on the? So it sounds like we're going to do something. Do you
Well-
want to do 150?
The collective wisdom is that right now it looks like we're looking at $1 million plus potentially for our repaving of the roads after we finish the big water projects. So to your point, to start prudently chipping away at that and putting that in reserve for that big nut, because we're not going to be able to make that money in a year or two
Right.
if we don't. So, I mean, I understand both arguments, and I don't think Google Fiber will require us to do any necessary repaving. I think once we do the repaving for Google Fiber to make it all look nice and all that, but they're going to patch over and get our streets back to stable for their part. So,
Well, and to that point, so will the contractor on the for the water project. I mean, it won't be required for us to repave. I mean, they're going to be required to put it back the way it was
Right.
under the existing. But we all know
right.
that's never
Yeah.
that's never
We
perfect.
know what it looked like after the last one.
Yeah.
The difference is that even with, from what I've read, even with Google Fiber, they will be making 2 cuts on both sides of the road. And so they'll patch it, but it's gonna be a patch. It's not like
Right,
a
it's-
full asphalt
Right.
cover.
Correct,
And
but
so
it's
if we are looking at repaving, we need to look at it, whether we spend a little bit on a patch or we spend a good amount on the repaving, and hopefully this study will help us with that.
Right.
But if you repave curb to curb, then you've covered over everything that's been torn up, and you're not doing a temporary or limited lot. It's the difference in 4 or 5 years versus
Right.
however long a street usually lasts. You've introduced that many options for water to get under the pavement. So
Correct.
that's the reason to consider all of it.
I'm actually agreeing with everyone on this, so, but I just need to know what y'all want to do and where you want to take it from.
My feeling, my preference is 150 out of the water fund. I mean, the fund, that's what it's for, that's why we have it. So it seems like we should use the money that's there, that we have.
Okay.
Which would help us.
Out of the street fund?
Yeah, the street, yeah,
No,
I
the
mean,
street
sorry.
fund.
Street fund, sorry. Yeah.
You have stumbled upon my next idea later on in the year. Yeah. Okay, so you all want to do 150?
I would just say from a planning standpoint, we also have to consider that every time you get somebody to come out here to pave, you have mobilization costs. And so doing it little
Piecemeal,
bits
right.
at a time is more expensive than doing a larger project. And
But I
Shanti is our
think what we-
paving queen over here, but,
I agree with that, but
Yeah.
I also think, are we gonna have that project this year to Brooks' point? Like,
And to be clear, these dollars are still in the unexpended balance on the street. We can always come back and do other things in the budget later on in the year. This honestly is as much to put in the budget so we see it in about 6 months and go, oh yeah, we need to be doing that. It's the same reason we
The only,
did the study last year, and about 6 months down the road we
but
looked
the
at
only
it.
difference is that will like affect the tax rate that we choose, and then that tax rate, that ends up setting what the revenue was, so then the next year, it kind of like. keeps
It doesn't if
adjusting.
you take it out of the street like you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's why
I
I'm-
would do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So I know so your preference is 150 out of street.
150 and out of the street funds.
Yours is 150 out of street. Phil, I'm probably not, you're probably more along what's here.
I am, just because I feel like a reserve is appropriate.
Yeah. Sarah?
I'm kind of same.
Well,
Yeah,
there
so
you,
that's what I'm saying, so we're.
So
Yeah.
we're split. Well, we can.
you could also split it. You could also do some out of street, some out of the other.
So we
I-
do 100,000 out of each for budgeting purposes?
I really am good with either of it. Would y'all be okay with 100 out of each?
I would.
I could do it.
In the spirit of
Mm,
compromise?
No, I'm
No,
150 out of
well,
street.
I think your swing
Well,
votes to your right.
Yeah,
there,
But
then.
exactly.
if it's 150, then it would be 75 and 75.
Yeah, they raised it back to 200.
Oh, okay.
So you got an offer over here at 100 and 100. You got 100, got 100.
Well, you know, I just think because of the impact to the tax rate, and the fact that we will have another bond issuance that will impact that tax rate next year or the year after. I think we need to do, if we have expenditures for pavement this year, we should do it out of the street fund.
What about this offer? What about 150 out of street, 50 out of general?
I'm okay with that too.
Would y'all be okay with that? I think you're gonna still have enough. I think you'll still have enough to do. We can come back and adjust it when we look at the final numbers.
I can compromise.
Let's
I can
look
compromise.
at it, and then we can remember. We'll put a pin in
Yeah.
this one too. Do 150 out of street.
You know,
50 out of general.
The taxpayer has already paid what's in, they're paying for it out of the tax rate. We're
Absolutely.
just not doubling up,
Right.
in my view.
No, I'm certainly not for increasing taxes on our taxpayers.
That's a 150, and then 2 out of general, yeah, 50 out of general, okay. So what does that do? How mu, what do they have left?
I'm also not to having us have a big surprise.
So that leaves us at 99,000 at the no new revenue rate, 431,934 at the voter approval rate, and that puts our street department at 284,996.
Okay.
Is that, what amount did you take out of the, put in the general fund
That-
expenditures?
50.
50.
50.
Mhm.
And we'll say, this is one scenario we did not run, so I don't know what it's gonna do to the math, to the bottom number. I'm now I'm intrigued, so we'll see. All right, let's keep moving, to 140-1, PD handheld radios at 37,000. Again, we've talked about this one. I don't really see a lot of option for you here, guys. I think we're gonna have to do it, for PD. This is planned obsolescence at its finest. It is a racket, and I will say it on the record. And that's not, it's not about our PD. That's about the vendor. That's whatever name is at the bottom of that radio is who I'm talking to. Are you all okay with that? Okay, so approved at 37. Okay, the next one is 100-40-2. This is PD body cams. This is 15,700. This is probably legitimate in my mind because they do run 24/7, and we switch them off officer to officer. So, again, I think this is one we kind of have to do. If I don't hear objection,
What
we
did we
will.
say the life,
What's that?
life expectancy of these cameras? It's like they last a
It's
few
about
years.
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right at the horizon of where I can remember doing it, and I'm annoyed by it every time. All right, approve that one at 15.7. Okay, the next one is speed trailer software. Chief, can you remind me on this one? I don't even remember what this. It's not that much. It's 2,300. I assume we're going to approve it, but tell us
Right,
what it
this
is again.
For upfitting that speed trailer to a cloud-based system.
Oh, where it's cloud-based and we can
Correct.
collect the data and that sort of thing. Yes, again. This is one that's staff PD chief brought to us. It was small enough we probably could have rolled it into the budget, but we'll give you a stab at it. Everybody okay with this one?
Mhm.
Okay, approve that one at 2,300. Okay, the next one is the Brazos ticket riders. This was lower on the priority list for chief. I will say, however, they've been kind of cobbling together different. It hasn't been a great system, and we tried to make a switch to the automated cell phone
Right.
app, and that
That's
was
correct.
that was a
We
failure.
did try a different system that was gonna be cheaper, and unfortunately, it did not work.
And this probably does take care of us for a while. Wouldn't
Correct.
use the
That
thing.
is correct.
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth doing. We can revisit it if the numbers don't pan out, but I would recommend that we do it. Yes, ma'am?
And I also understand this will have some efficiencies with the court also. Doesn't
Correct, it
this
does
coordinate
interface.
with the court? So
Mhm.
I think it's worth it.
So, do we have any read on what the efficiencies, what money is going to be saved as a result of doing this? Do we have any kind of metrics on that, or?
I don't have
Any
any metric
idea?
on what it will save. I mean, obviously, it will just help with the efficiency, because like I said, currently, it's a paper-based system, so I mean, now you're at the
Right.
accuracy of the person inputting the data plus, and then it going to court and doing the same thing, where this actually allows, and it also allows us to track and be able to pull the data a lot quicker, and create reporting.
Everybody good with that one?
A lot of money.
Seems like a lot of money. I guess I'm
It-
good, but I could be convinced that maybe.
It
the
is a
pay-
lot of money, but what you're paying for is because we're having to purchase equipment. And so that, I mean, with the equipment, it's always gonna, because we're gonna have to buy the ticket writers along with the printers. So that's what this is including.
And this is also, I'm sort of in your same boat, Alec, but I also know that we're gonna be sitting here a year from now having this exact same discussion until we do it.
Right. And then what happens too is even when the legislation updates, this automatically updates the citation, where currently what we're having to do is reorder citations, make sure we roll that out. I mean, and so this allows us to even make adjustments to citations, on the
Because the
spot.
dollar amounts of the fines are changing? Is that what you're saying?
No, they require us to put sometimes literature on the citations, and then I know, in order to be able to process additional fees, we have to change literature on the citations, which is currently what we're trying to do right now, but which our current remedy is to make labels and putting it on the citations.
Chief, didn't you also, when you were explaining this to me, you also said that it would help with recruitment of officers, because officers that have used an electronic ticket writer in other jurisdictions are very unhappy to have to use a written citation form. in
Paper
this-
citations are very old school.
And their security issues.
And we're usually
associated
proud of
with
that.
I mean,
But in this
so-
particular instance, maybe.
I'm just trying to make a case for some kind of payback
Yeah.
for the $25,000.
Well, I'm gonna save you I got a better number on the Meraki firewall, so I will save you
Oh, she's horse trading now.
$6,000, so.
Yeah.
Well, and the chief also would explain this to me, that it's in some ways an improvement to security, because while the officer's handwriting out a ticket, the perpetrator could be doing something bad.
Right.
Versus being able to
And-
do it like you would do it on your cell phone.
Right, what this does is
So-
that they can scan the registration sticker, they can scan the driver's license now. I mean, it's a lot more.
Some
efficient.
degree of officer safety.
And, right, and efficiency.
Well, it seems like it'd be a whole lot more accurate and a lot fewer tickets that could be thrown out in
Yes.
court because they're not correct.
Sure.
Right, if you're handwriting it and you write down the wrong numbers,
Sure.
or you hand enter them into the system, the wrong numbers, as
Right.
opposed to being able to scan them and get them in that way. That-
Right.
And then the court clerk has to redo that again, because
Right.
Right.
she's translating a paper ticket to a
Right.
court record.
Okay.
I think it's worth it.
Okay, I hear general relative consensus on the 25. All right, we can come back to it if it's not. You can always vote against the budget too. That's your last ditch effort. Okay, with that, okay, let's give them a glimpse as to where we are now. So you've got 19,000 under a no new revenue scenario. You've got 351 under a voter approval scenario. It's not looking good for my 50K over there in general fund. But anyway, you've
So
still
we're
got.
still good.
You're still good for the next couple,
Yeah,
for sure.
we still got 19.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to 100-40-5. You got new PD firewall. Remind us on this one.
So that's gonna be for the firewall that we need to, ours is going end of life. And so I know Councilman Glasheen wanted a little bit more information, and with that information, I was able to get with our IT provider, and they provided a harder number. This was more kind of a guesstimate. So that harder number came in at 10,700. So it came in almost $6,000 cheaper.
10,000 what?
10,700. I put a
700.
copy on your,
Okay.
and that that's going to be more of a accurate number.
Thank you.
No problem.
And question, does this firewall protect all of the the body cameras and the riders and all of those devices.
Yes, ma'am, so that,
we-
it covers our servers in the PD.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Again, I think this is one we have to do, so.
And that's
Everybody.
10,000?
Well, can we change the
Ten.
amount?
Oh, it's
to-
not, you,
You said it's 10.
10,000.
oh, look
700.
at that. I didn't
said-
realize it wasn't already rolled in. That's a good, nice touch, bringing it to the meeting like that.
Yeah, see, I saved
She
you.
wanted to make sure we get
Yeah,
over the wire.
I thought it was already there. Started talking about that extra 1%
start
COLA.
pushing
She's
back.
like, oh, it turns out I got an extra
Look
$6
what I
grand in
got
my
in my
pocket. Okay, good deal. Thank you, council. And with that, you have, under the current scenario, you have 8,500 left over under a no new revenue scenario. You have 300. Oh, and because
We
the
still
last
have the
one,
street.
yeah, that the citywide speed limit signs, it's already a done deal, and it's a relatively low cost too, so it's already taken care of. So with that, you're basically done with these decisions. We can go back and revisit a couple that we've talked about. But under the decisions you've made so far, you've got 8,500 left over under a no new revenue scenario. You've got
Except we haven't put in the 2,900 for the
Yeah.
street.
Oh, yeah,
Put
put
that
the
in
20,
there.
yeah.
Just put it in.
For the
We've
sign.
got
Is that
it.
the
What?
street signs?
but it'll be out of this current budget,
So
right?
this is another one that's kind of weird. We also have went ahead and purchased those since we approved that resolution or the ordinance changing the speed limit. So we have, but I haven't backed it out of our balance yet. So I guess we could just put it in here and approve it, and it's the same
It's the same
effect on
effect
it's the
as
same
the-
net effect on the numbers.
on the unexpended balance. Yeah, that's
so
fine.
we'll just go
put
ahead and throw it in.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a more accurate picture. Oh,
Okay.
hold on, that was the wrong thing. Did it do it?
Yeah.
Right.
Look, it's not.
It didn't lower my
Except
number.
it
Oh
didn't lower
no,
that.
we get to see you do
Maybe
your
it
magic.
came out of the street.
Oh, it may have come out of the street.
Oh, that's exactly what happened.
Which is fine.
Yeah. No,
Nice.
it didn't come out of
Oh,
anything.
okay.
Okay.
I didn't want y'all to have to see that.
Show them what you do. Show them your stuff.
Work your magic.
I don't know
No
what it
pressure.
Oh,
This is the
there it
final
goes.
exam.
Okay.
I watch her do this in the office, and I have no clue how she does it.
Okay, we're fixed.
You did it already?
She
Yeah.
did.
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
It's
See,
reflected.
I watched it, and I still don't know what she did.
That's okay. It's good.
All right. So now, with all the decisions you've made, you have 5,400 or what is it? 610.
610.
I feel like I'm taking a vision test. 5,610 left over under no new revenue scenario. You've got 338 left over under the voter approval option. Okay, so the things that we can go back and visit, so we can revisit the 1% COLA, and I guess I could come off of, we could come off of the, however you want to do it. So you've got, if you want to stay under a no new revenue scenario, you've got $5,000 to work with. If you want to do something between that and the voter approval rate, it wouldn't take much. If you want to do the COLA and we can recalculate what you adopt, it's whatever you want to do. We can my point being, you can make whatever decisions here. We've got plenty of flexibility, and we could recalculate what rate gets you to zero balance if you want us to, or we could adjust some of the decisions here. We could reduce that 50 that we took out of general fund for the streets to like 25. That would give you enough to do your 1% COLA if you want to do that, or take it to 30.
Well, you said that one of our options on COLA was somewhere in between the 3 and the 4. So if I like the no new revenue rate. If we take that 5,000 and change and add that onto the 3% COLA,
You could do like a
3 point.
just make it easy on.
3%.
I would just say make it easy on Abel and like do 3 or 3.5 or
Abel can do math.
yeah. He can, but I can't check it. He can, but I can't. It's the checking that's the problem. So, Sarah, what are you thinking?
I am in favor of adding the extra 1% COLA. And I don't have a problem with us going slightly over the no new revenue rate. It's it adjusts, we're getting new, so how does that work? We're getting new value added to our,
Yes, so to be clear, you basically, at the no new revenue rate, you are absorbing all of the, and Abel, jump in. Why don't you hop up so I don't mess this up? We are absorbing, because we had increased value, even at a no new revenue rate, we are absorbing basically the cost of the bonds into the no new revenue rate. So the only thing that I would caution against the going with the no new revenue rate, if you look back at this other sheet, we are technically running a deficit if you do that.
Yeah. I can pull that up here.
What,
Because
Do you know what-
it's below the current rate.
right,
do you
Yeah.
Your
know-
expenditure, technically your now, again, I believe strongly that it's the right practice to begin with that beginning, to see what your unexpended balance is, because you've collected those taxes from the constituency previously, right? But technically speaking, our expenditures would be running 200 and whatever that number is.
226.
226,000. Our expenditures under a no new revenue scenario are running 226,000 greater than what you're bringing in. Now,
For the next fiscal.
for the next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
That said, you're fine because we start with that beginning balance, that unexpended balance. And it's actually not that bad because that 226 is basically the absorption of that INS rate because of the bonds. So you're keeping everyone whole, you're holding them harmless even with the bonds. Which is a good, I mean, that's some pretty solid. But technically, the community has said we're okay if you want to. We're okay with spending that 226,000 a year if we do these water projects. So I mean, we're in a good spot, in either scenario. But I do want you to understand, I'm always for the no new revenue rate. I'm fine if we do the no new revenue rate, but if you're choosing the no new revenue rate, you are choosing to absorb those bonds into existing revenues, and we were technically running a deficit.
Right.
don't think that's prudent.
You've always heard me argue vehemently for the no new revenue. I'm not doing it this year, and it's
Right.
because of what you're saying.
Right,
The column, the no new revenue column, the general fund projected unexpended balance, is that at the end of this current fiscal year?
Correct.
Or the next?
No,
this
year.
This current, okay.
Yes.
All right.
It's essentially what's left in the bank when we're done with this year.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
I wish we could see. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, it'd be nice to know. Okay, what's the rate for a balanced budget rate? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Somewhere between.
somewhere in between there.
And we can calculate that. That's not, I say,
Right.
and by we, I
It'll
mean.
be between .1796 and .1767.
I guess it'll be closer to the .919 because we got minus 200 on this side and plus 100 on that side, so it'll
It's-
be about a
this-
third.
This is the current rate, this is the no new revenue
Right.
rate, so it's between those two.
No, yeah. If that's the case, yeah.
It'd be about a penny and a half.
Maybe like what?
About a penny and a half, I'm guessing,
Okay.
A penny and a half to.
on top of the no new revenue tax rate.
Okay. So-
Like you were saying, somewhere in the middle between the
Yeah.
1767 and the 1983.
Yeah, exactly.
1917, if it's a penny and a half from the no new revenue rate.
Yeah. And again, that's an estimate.
And-
I haven't put the pencil to it.
Yeah, and if, my thought would be make the decisions you want to make on the exceptional items. Those are what you believe are needed for the community. and then instruct us to go back and figure out exactly what you're asking for, which is now get that number to 0. So decide what you want to decide, and we will go calculate and figure out what the rate is to get you to 0,
Get to 0
to get to a balanced budget.
so that
So we're-
revenues,
Right. And it won't be much.
the unexpended balance would
Remains the
remain the
same.
same, and it'd be a 0.
For instance, here, let me do it like this. Go back to your exceptional item sheet.
Oh, sure.
Now put a 1% COLA in there. Now go down to the bottom. So we would recalculate the rate under that scenario. We would recalculate the rate to make up for that $7,000, $7,800 deficit, plus the, well, two scenarios. We could either just make up that 7,000, which would be hardly anything, or we could make up that 7,000 plus the $226,000 deficit that you're running in the overall budget. You could do either one of those.
So how does this work again? We pick it tonight, and then the rate.
This is all just workshop related.
Okay.
You don't. That's the reason we posted all those public hearings for next month's council meeting. That's when.
But so then the next month meeting, you have it just dialed in.
It's all
exactly
dialed
what
in.
the one rate is going to be, and then.
That's right.
We can
Okay.
bring multiple options
That's what I
though,
was
if you
wondering.
want to see both of them, and we've done that in previous years where we brought
Yeah.
the ordinance adopting the no new revenue or the voter approval, so both budgets could be seen,
Or something in between.
or something in between, right?
Which is what we're-
I was just wondering if it might be nice to have Kevin's input on it or thoughts.
Yeah.
too.
Yes, ma'am.
So, let's say we go with a balanced budget. What happens to the 1,000,008? Is that in a reserve fund? What is the use to which those funds can be put?
You would still be holding your 6-month reserve, but you would have eaten up
Some of that, more of
you've
that.
eaten up more of your discretionary spending for decision.
That 1.8 stays the same. That's our projected at the end of this year, September 30th, that's what we have
Well,
left.
so we have cash.
Correct.
If we go with the no new revenue rate, how much cash do we have at the end of next fiscal year, assuming we've been spot on with everything?
Assuming that you all don't dip into the 6-month reserve, which I would not recommend we do,
I'm not either.
then you would just have the 1.373 in the bank at the end of
In
the
the
year.
reserve.
Yeah, in the
So
reserve.
the difference between the 1.3 and the 1.8, explain where that goes.
We spend it.
So
Spend
we-
it.
Well,
In-
we'd still
We'd
have
spend part of it.
300,000.
We'd
We'd
spend-
still have 300,000.
That's
Yeah.
part of the
The-
funds we're spending
that's the-
against with the exceptions.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, got
That
it.
is correct.
All right.
Right.
And that's why that 300 you were talking about, that's the difference between the salmon colored side and the yellow colored side.
And it is important to note that these are all generally recurring expenditures, so these are just your operating expenditures. So if we don't meet it this year with the tax rate, next year we're gonna have, probably the same issue.
That's Sarah's point.
Mm-hmm.
Is if you're running that 200 plus deficit, it's really not the best look.
Yeah.
It means we're spending more than we're bringing in,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
which
And
is
we,
not.
And you can do
smart.
that to an extent because we start with that unexpended balance. But if you do that too long, too much, then you don't have any of that to work with.
Well, but we keep having winter storms
Yeah.
and droughts and all kinds of other things that we don't know what kind of
It's very true.
expenses are going to come up in the future, and so spending more than we're bringing in is not leaving us in a good place
Yeah.
to be able to accommodate those unexpected things
And-
that the residents
yeah.
expect us to cover and pay for,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't have the money to do it.
And keep in mind too, that yellow column, that's only 3.5. That's a 3.5% increase, right?
Correct.
Right at. So, I mean, we're not
Well,
talking about a
the-
huge
the-
percentage.
The reason I wouldn't go there is because we have another bond issue.
I agree.
Yeah,
And I think
and-
that,
and
and
so-
there's no justification in my mind for having an excess of 500.
Mhm.
But I'm just saying, overall, it's still far less than, and it's far less than what was allowed to do just 10 years ago, right? I mean, 10 years ago, it was 8%, and it was an automatic 8% every time.
Mhm.
And this discussion didn't happen, and I don't fault anyone for that. But I think we've done a good job to really drill down on this and live well within our means, even with a 3.5% increase. I mean, we're debating between nothing and 3.5%. That's where all of this debate is, between 0 and 3.5%. And we got all kinds of options. I mean, that's a good place to be.
Well, and it seems to me if we go with the zero budget, then we've got a healthy reserve. We've come in with no change in the tax rate, and we've, well, we're actually a little bit below where the current rate is.
Correct.
And we have room to do the other half of the bond issue when it comes time to do that without a huge impact.
Right. Right.
We'll
And I-
maybe grow out of it,
Yeah.
any impact.
Right.
We'll see.
And I think, Abel, we did some back of the napkin. A half penny was what, roughly $86 or something like
Right.
that?
Correct.
So a half penny is roughly $86 on an average $2 million home. So if you did a, you know,
I think it'll be exactly like what you were saying, a penny and a half. It'll end up being like, if you're talking about like balance, like going at a balance
Mm-hmm.
budget, yeah, I think the rate will end up being close to like 0.19 is what it'll probably be, my guess.
so on a $2 million home, extra $250 a year, I'm thinking you're probably not going to get pitchforks coming at you in any scenario.
We're in a good spot.
So let's do this. Go back to your exceptional items if you would. We need to wrap this up. Here's what I'm going to suggest we do. We'll leave it in like this. We've got your COLA 4. We've got the other things that we've done. So we'll bring back to you, like that $7,000 deficit because of your exceptional item. That's super easy to make up. That's going to essentially, that's going to basically be at your no new revenue rate anyway. So we'll bring back to you well, if you're okay with this, I can adjust if you want to not go into the red on your exceptional items. We can also reduce that. We can easily reduce that pavement repairs and improvements from 50K to 30K, or 50K to 45, or 40. You want to just do that?
There's
And
also.
then you will have, then when we come back to you, you will have a true no new revenue option. And then we'll also bring to you a true balanced budget option. Is that okay?
See, there's also a small chance. I don't know how much the control network survey will go down, but it could go down. I don't know how much data we have, but it could go down maybe $5,000, which would possibly kind of eat into that overage. We have it in at the full 25, but we know we have some data. We just don't know how much.
And again, the pavement repairs is a placeholder. That's going to be a larger discussion. Why don't you just drop that drop that 50 to 40. Oh, not $40.
Oh.
That will definitely take care of it. Yeah.
And that takes care of you.
And that gets you living under your that will give you a true no new revenue rate option when you come back next month, and then we will bring you a true balanced budget option next month, which will be somewhere in between those two numbers.
Good.
Okay.
Not to throw a kink in this, but do we have anything in here for Oakville
We took that back out.
Not this fiscal year.
Yeah, we don't.
They didn't use it last year. There didn't seem to be, I mean, there were multiple discussions and nobody really wanted to go there.
Hasn't gone away.
I understand.
Phil and I, we did
We
try.
worked on
We
it.
did work on it.
But we have to have partnership with the homeowners, and that didn't occur last year despite our best efforts, so.
But you're right, it has not gone away. We will end this budget with a significant reserve, so if you all.
Okay.
Last thing that I'll say, I do want to point out to you, Sarah, this is on your question to us. Hold on 1 second. Go to the 10-year expenditure planning document. We're going to show you, give you a glimpse of what you'll be in store for next year, because it's going to take us a while to do this. But Ashley and I talked about it, and she actually had a great idea, and it's a budgeting process that she's used in some other cities and has seen it work successfully. I'm going to let her explain it to you.
Sure. I'm just trying to get it.
But this is getting at that question that we had last time of, would it be pertinent for us to start earmarking dollars for replacement? And I kind of felt like it might be, but in greater discussion with people who do this more often, that starts tying your budget up in ways that you end up not being able to spend it. Whereas if you, okay, I'm stealing all of her thunder, so now.
That's okay. So I think if we're creating, if the goal is to plan our expenditures so that, every year we have a pretty similar amount of expenditures on these bigger items, we're not coming to you out of the blue with, we need 3 vehicles this year. This is kind of a way that I've used in a previous city for where we plan those. And so how this list here works is that we would build out pretty much all of our assets down the side here. And we would have the purchase year, so we would know when we got them, and that would allow us to better plan. Okay, we bought this firewall this year. It has a 7-year life expectancy, so we would know that 7 years out, we needed to be preparing to spend that money. We wouldn't necessarily be setting aside reserves, because in the end, that's kind of what we use those unexpended balances for. But we would be able to go, okay, that next year you're going to need that. We probably don't want to throw in radios as well. We don't want to be bringing on these extra items. So at the end of the year, we'd kind of have these totals down here, and they'd be relatively stable. But it'd be a way that we'd be planning out those larger expenditures so that, we don't end up with $150,000 in 1 year. Maybe we have $50,000 a year going forward.
Because what's killing us is the volatility, right? What kills us is we go 50, 50, 50, 200, and then 25, and then 75, and then 50, 50, 250. Like, that's what's killing us. So if we can just plan for it and start smoothing out those edges and have it be more standardized year to year to year to year, then that's going to accomplish the goal in a smarter way without tying up your hands on the budget.
Right.
Year to year.
Maybe that's but the unexpended balance too can be
Right.
used for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because we do end up with a significant unexpended balance every
Police cars.
year.
Mhm.
so.
Right.
Police cars.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really, this is kind of a version of that, right? So when we put those PD vehicles on that lease program, because then we can budget for it every year. Like that's what we're doing here.
They're leased.
They're leased now,
Mhm.
but they weren't as of 2 years ago. So now we can just plug that number in every year.
And this would be good we'd have one for both our water and our wastewater funds too, and that would help us with rate planning. We'd be able to look further out and say, we're probably going to need this this grinder pump has a 10-year life expectancy. We're going to need to replace it at some point. And so I think it's just, it's a good way to start planning now, but it's more than an accounting where we don't just put it in a reserve and kind of forget about it. Here it's something we can look at and plan for.
And it's going to help us inventory our big. So another note too. This is only for items over 5,000. So this is not small stuff, right? This is the big stuff that really puts a hole in your budget. But it's going to take us, I mean, it won't take us forever, but we need to really go through and do a good inventory to make sure we're catching everything. And we'll probably even put things on there like the generators that we'll talk about later and some of those big ticket items so that we can kind of start planning those out. Anyway, more to come on that. We'll build that out after we're done with this budget.
I have one more comment about the budget.
Yes, sir.
So, how much, do we have like a number of like how much our unexpended balance grew or shrank last year? Like, do we know?
We have that.
I have
We
it
can
somewhere.
look at it.
Yeah.
We don't have it for comparison purposes.
I don't have a number, but it grew.
I
I
mean, so
mean,
maybe like
I'm thinking about 200,000 maybe.
So maybe another option, I don't know how hard it is for you to prepare like things for us to look at in the next budget, but like maybe another one that's somewhere in between. I mean, I'm just sort of wondering if like, I know we want to build up our reserves, but if we build it up and we have the volatility like you were speaking of this time around, like maybe it's okay to use a little bit smaller portion of that unreserved balance, not to take it all the way down to 6 months, but
Mhm.
The
take
problem,
20,000 of it or
the problem we're
50,000.
gonna have this coming year is our M&O is going down.
Is what?
Our maintenance and operations revenues going down from 2023 to 2024
Okay.
because of the smaller levy for M&O. So the reserves are not gonna be what they were this year.
Okay,
That's, yeah.
got it.
And we do, to an extent, try to do that. That's really where we're trying to get that to. Like we're always going to have an unexpended balance, but that's really why we go in and do that real deep dive on the line by line for the expenditures. Like when we're driving those down by 5% per department, that we're trying to drive that down as much as possible. But even when you do that, you're always going to end up with some unexpended.
Mhm.
So. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, council. And with that, we will close the budget workshop. And if you would stick with me, we'll take an 8-minute recess.
recipe we want to get.
Okay, the Rollingwood City Council will come back to order at 7:41. And we were back on the agenda, and we will begin with public comment on items not already on the agenda. Do we have anyone signed up? We do. Ms. Nyer, step right up. Please. She's gonna.
I have pictures.
Great.
I mailed a letter to all of
I'm
you.
gonna let you pass it out, and then I'll let you get on the mic and identify
Okay.
yourself. Okay, thank you.
I'll try to talk quickly. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm here tonight because I believe that Rollingwood residents and homeowners need protective ordinances and building codes. As my letter described the situation to you, we've lived in our home 45 years. In the last picture, you can see where the homes were set back, both of my home and the next door neighbor's home in the past. And never in all of these years did I ever expect a 3-story building to go right next to me, blocking all of my light and the trees that I used to see. The trees have all been cut down. So I'm here tonight to say that I understand that there's been a certain amount of apathy in the community in general, and also I believe on various boards and councils, to building code changes, to the need for changes. And I'm here to say that I totally believe that we absolutely do need code changes. When we built our home, we had to set back from the sides 15 feet, 30 feet from the street, 20 feet from the back. I don't know when these codes were changed, but obviously they're different now. And I believe that if we do not protect our citizens, we're going to have a totally different community in the future. So I really believe that we need to envision the future and think about what it is we want. Do we want an inner city, urban density with monster structures next to each other this far apart? I mean, why not live in the middle of downtown Austin? Or do we want a residential neighborhood with trees and green spaces where residents of all ages can feel that they are appreciated and enjoy the life here? I believe that we need to protect our legacy trees. I cannot believe the beautiful trees that were cut down to build the house next door to us. We need more spacing between structures. If that home that is currently under construction right now next door to us had only been 2 stories, I could still see daylight. I could still see the sky and the trees. But oh no, it's a 3-story structure right on top of us. And our home is built around a courtyard, so our living room, kitchen, dining area are all focused on that courtyard. And this structure now has completely blocked that sun. And what we will probably do as a result will damage that lack of sunny, or will create an even darker space. So again, what I believe is we need to protect our legacy trees. We need more spacing between structures. We need better rules regarding impervious cover. We need height limitations. No more 3-story buildings. It's crazy. New or proposed structures should be appropriate to the lot size and to adjacent structures. Obviously, a 1-acre lot is far different from a 1/3 acre lot. And when we are approving new structures, we should take into consideration adjacent structures. And we need to consider privacy, which we have totally lost in our home. Just to kind of finish this out, because I know I only have 3 minutes. Interestingly, a couple of months ago, I was getting mail from our mailbox, and one of my neighbors who lives in the cul-de-sac in front of us stopped. And he said, and this was, of course, before the new structure had begun being erected. But he said to me, he said, Jeannie, I just want to tell you, I've always admired your home. He said, I've always admired the vibe of your house. And he said, and this, I'm serious. He said, you know, your home is one of the kinds of homes that make Rollingwood a nice community. And I feel like my home has really been ruined. I don't know that we could sell it. We have this huge structure built over us. And if somebody else were to buy the home, our current home, which we have spent 45 years improving and maintaining, I think they'd probably tear it down. And if you all don't work hard and fight to do what's right and protect Rollingwood citizens from changes like this, homes like mine, which are a little bit different, won't be able to continue to exist. We will not have a residential neighborhood. We're going to have urban density. And is that what you want? I don't. And it really, I'm sick about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nyer. Do we have anyone else wishing to testify on items not on the agenda? Shanti, step right up.
Shanti Jayakumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. I hope you will indulge me with a couple extra minutes because I'm going to talk about 3 of our longtime residents who just passed away in the last month, and I'd like to bring that up to honor them.
Your extension of time is granted.
Thank you. So you probably have a parent, a grandparent, or other family member who grew up during the Depression and or did military duty or served in one of the wars. Over the last month, we lost 3 longtime residents of our city, and each of those 3 gentlemen served their country in the armed forces. First off, I'm giving you this in the order in which they passed away, so to say. William McAfee, better known as Bill, passed away on June 20th at the age of 96 at his home, surrounded by his children. He grew up during the Great Depression, and most of this information is from the obituary column. I knew him personally, but he grew up during the Great Depression when his father was without a job for 4 years, and the family got evicted twice. Bill served in the Merchant Marines in both the Atlantic and the Pacific arenas. He was on a ship carrying a full load of ammunition for the invasion of Japan during World War II, when the atomic bomb was dropped and the Japanese surrendered. So Bill then, this back to his early life, Bill worked in a print shop at the age of 13 in Corsicana. And then he continued in the printing business after the war, and he owned the Futura Press, which is an Austin-based press, that published a number of newspapers, magazines, and books. He later started Futura Systems and wrote custom software programs for his customers. Bill was a man of many talents and passions. He cared deeply about the environment, democracy, and that people had enough to eat. He had been there before. The second person that passed away was Dr. Robert King. He was the founding dean of the College of Liberal Arts at UT. He passed away on July 6th at the age of 87. He did his military service before pursuing advanced degrees in linguistics. He started off with degrees in mathematics from Georgia Tech, later developed a passion for linguistics, earning his PhD in German linguistics from the University of Wisconsin. He was deeply interested in the Yiddish language and Jewish culture. He was a luminary while on the UT campus, and at home in Rollingwood, he was a family man, deeply devoted to his wife, his children, and grandkids. The obituary states that, and I'm quoting, he was a dog lover of the highest order and knew the name of every dog in the neighborhood. Now, he will be sorely missed by humans and by pets alike. Now, he lived next door to Councilmember Sarah Hudson, so she probably has more stories to share. Then finally, Aubrey Jean Brawley, his wife Teresa, is here with us today. Affectionately known as Jean, passed away on July 24th after an extended illness at the age of 94. Jean served in the Korean War. His wife Teresa is well known to many of us as a volunteer extraordinaire, especially for the residents up and down Pickwick Lane. Jean and Teresa moved to Rollingwood in 1964, having bought their home, their lot from George Hatley for $3,000. Just imagine, 1964, $3,000. Okay. Jean worked for and retired from the Austin American-Statesman, and upon his retirement at the age of 60, he had this, let me show you all this. Let's see, where did I put it? This full page ad. Hold on just a second, sorry. I have it. Anyway, a full page description giving him a goodbye from the Statesman. Full page, full of pictures. Okay. Now, this is the interesting part that I didn't know. Jean worked as a linotype operator at the Statesman. To those unfamiliar with the term, including myself, linotype is a hot metal typesetting machine introduced in the 1880s that casts individual lines of metal type known as slugs. Then the slugs then are arranged and clamped into a frame to make a one-page press plate. And that's how they printed. Thomas Edison, by the way, called the linotype the eighth wonder of the world. I just discovered that while I researched something about linotype. So linotype was replaced by photo typesetting and computer typesetting techniques in the 1970s and 1980s. So from the 1880s, there was the linotype that printed all the books and magazines and papers and everything. Now, Jean and Teresa were regular volunteers at the park and wherever the community needed their help. Whether it was watering newly planted shrubs or whatever, they were there. Teresa also volunteered at City Hall as an election clerk, and Jean would help set up all those the polling machines here. He would come in at 6 a.m., set them up. He was a strong guy for us, because I've also worked those elections, and then come back at night to pack them up. And here I have to tell you, it was a touching farewell to Jean when a few short days before he passed, Dan Arispe, our police, visited Jean at Brookdale, and also Police Chief Crystal and Dan attended the memorial service for Jean. Our entire police team knew Jean and Teresa and were extremely protective of them, just as they are with all of our residents, especially the elderly. Special thanks to all our police department for going above and beyond in caring for our residents. And I could go on, but I just wanted you all to know that these are 3 longtime residents that will be missed in our neighborhood. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for the remembrance. Yes. Thank you, Shanti. Are there anyone else signed up for public comment? Hearing none at this time, we will move on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. Happy to entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda?
You have a motion by Ms. Brown on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. Robinson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 4 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. I see. Yeah, did it again. I thought the other Kevin was on this time. There being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. With that, we'll move on to the regular agenda. We have agenda item number 8 that I'll pull up for an update on the installation of generators at the wastewater lift stations. I believe this is Ms. Hudson's agenda item, but I have Izzy here that's ready to give the update.
Right. I had residents asking, what are they doing over there? And I said, well, I think they're putting in the pads for the new generators, but we hadn't heard anything, and so I just wanted to get it
Sounds-
out there so everybody understands what's going on and
Sounds great. I will open it up with kudos to Izzy and his team. They've been doing a great job, and I'll let him give us an update on our progress.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, overall, you've probably seen some movement, work going on over at the Rockaway Cove, Hatley Drive, and Nixon Drive lift stations. And what's going on over there right now is there's footings, concrete footings that have been poured, and there's three, happy to say there's 3 generators already been installed on site. We're just waiting on SitePro to have send in their electricians to actually come in and set up the automatic transfer switches. I don't have a definite date when, but we're hoping to do that in the next week or so. Let's see here, Almerian and Vale, those 2 locations will be, those footings will be poured the next couple of weeks. There's already, what I should have started with is out of the 6 lift stations, not including the Lana, the lift stations we're gonna install natural gas. 5 out of those 6 locations already have gas on site. They have the risers. The only one missing is the one on Pleasant Cove, and we're waiting on the engineers from Texas Gas to go ahead and approve the approvals for the designs on it. Other than that, also I've submitted the request for the meter installs to be set in place as well. So we can't actually have meters installed until all the generators are on site, but 3 of them, I was told that in the next couple of weeks, the meters will be put on site as well.
So you guys have done a great job so far. Good work
Thank
on
you.
the setting the pads. This has been a work in progress for some time. We used our ARPA fund, our federal proceeds that we got from the ARPA to purchase these generators, and it's taken us a while to work with Texas Gas to get them. This process that we're waiting on the 6th one is really what's held us up on the first 5, and they've done
Correct.
good to work with us. It's just taken a while to get it all kind of moving.
Yeah, and they've had some turnover on staff over there, so it kind of next engineer and the next engineer, and we've been working diligently to try and get them to pass these designs, and we're just waiting on one more. And apparently, I was told earlier today that 2 more weeks and they should.
And the good news, 5 out of 6, we could have once we get those set. 'Cause
Yeah.
we have one generator that, as you know, we've had to wheel around and crank up on each individual generator. So it's going to make the whole system
Yep.
much more resilient.
So
So
it's nice to see that we're only down to 3 generators that need to be installed out there. That's good to see.
and we do have plans too. Once the heat breaks a little bit, we'll try to do some plantings around some of these and try to soften the look. They're not huge, but we'll also do some plantings around them as well. Sure.
Any
Right.
questions?
Nope, that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Izzy. With that, we'll move off agenda item number 8 on to agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action to issue an RFP for information technology services, and recognize Ms. Wayman to walk us through this item.
Sure. So we currently have 2 information technology providers that assist us here at City Hall. We have one for the police department, one for the administrative services. It's been the practice, and also in the policy per our code of ordinances, to go out every 5 years for RFPs for our main consultants. And so we have now hit the point where those 2 contracts need to be reviewed. We have the RFP for the most part prepared, and we're planning on issuing that very soon, so that way we can have those brought back to you next month for a decision. We are hoping that through this process we get 1 service provider as opposed to 2. That's been something that has had to happen in the past based on our infrastructure, but we think now we'll be able to get 1 to handle both, which will make things a lot easier as far as getting all of our systems to talk to each other. So we have that ready to issue, and just would request y'all's authorization to send that out.
I move to approve issuance of an RFP for information technology services.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion, council? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. That we will move on to agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 2-194 of the city's code of ordinances regarding board and commission compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. And I recognize Ms. Wayman to talk us through this one.
This was a request that came out of last month's city council meeting. Previously, we did not have a way to allow any of our boards or commissions or committees to have any type of waiver on any of the Open Meetings Act provisions. Legal counsel has drafted this document here for you, and it's a very small change to our current language that just basically states that unless city council grants an exception, then all boards must follow the Texas Open Meetings Act. And so this is a small change to our code of ordinances.
And it was on our to-do list just to bring this back to you, council, for your consideration. I think it was a very simple thing to draft. It may be a larger policy decision for you all to make, but in terms of the mechanics of how to do it, it was pretty straightforward. I think actually Charlie may have drafted it while we were sitting here last council meeting. So it's up for discussion and up for action should you desire. Or you can let it die on the vine.
I'll move approval of the ordinances drafted.
You have a motion by Ms. Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Hudson and a second by Mr. McDuffie. Further discussion.
Yes. I would like us to establish a policy, some sort of guidelines on what the conditions are under which we would grant an exception. Because I don't want us to just be able to do it willy-nilly and not be consistent, and not have something that's thought out. I mean, I looked at this first and I went, oh, that's kind of a slippery slope right here. And I don't have a problem with having it this way in the ordinance, but I want to make sure that we have established some sort of guidelines that we have discussed in open meeting so that everybody knows what the circumstances are that we are considering that would allow us to grant an exception.
Alec?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it. I do think it's a slippery slope. I think that this council, fine, but what's going to happen if the council changes 2 years, 3 years down the line? I just think it's not a great idea. And I think it was well, we're going to get to it in the next bullet point, but the next agenda item, it was kind of, I think this whole discussion was generated by a request to like basically not have to abide by that in this thing. But I think that in the past we've had these and everybody's been able to do it. So I don't understand why we'd want to change it for this. I just don't. But so I'm a no on this.
Any other discussion, council?
Well,
Mr.
it
McDuffie?
is a discretionary thing, and this was driven by the desire by some members of the CRCRC to be able to act more prudently, back to Jeannie's point of trying to get something done a bit more quickly. And since everything is reviewed in the open meetings, and because the CRCRC is purely advisory, holding them to where they can't talk to each other and move things along a little bit more quickly was becoming a degree of an impediment. And that's what was driving this whole thing. And so it would be up to the discretion of a city council. We could restrict it to requiring that future city councils absolutely do abide by it, and to Sarah's point, we could restrict it to what are the parameters by which we would consider or allow future councils to consider removing the Open Meetings Act restriction on a very limited basis, because as you know, it does make things move much more slowly, and there are times when moving things along more prudently might be necessary.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it's, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think it's a slippery slope though. And, yeah, this is where I am on it. I'm not in favor of changing it at all.
So state law allows this, Charlie?
State law does not require purely advisory committees to comply with the Texas Open Meetings Act. So this provision is something that a previous city council put in place to self-impose requirement. And for the record, any future council could repeal it. We can't restrict future councils from repealing this provision.
Absolutely.
So purely advisory means that P and Z cannot be exempted? The Board of
No,
Adjustment
planning and
cannot be
zoning,
exempted?
planning and zoning cannot be exempted
Board of Adjustment?
because the statute specifically requires P and Z to comply. Board of Adjustment cannot be exempted. I'm trying to think of it.
Commission could be exempted.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of another city board or commission that would
Utility
otherwise.
Commission.
Utility Commission could,
Could be
they're
exempted.
advisory to y'all,
Yeah.
so.
Parks is
Park
There-
fine.
Commission
yeah.
and Utility Commission could be exempted if a council decided to.
Right, but they do not have.
I'm sorry, RCDC also could not be exempted. They would have to always comply. So those are
Okay.
the three off the top of my head that would always have to comply.
Right.
So the only ones that we could exempt would be Park Commission, Utility Commission, and then any ad hoc committees that we put
Correct.
together.
Correct.
That are purely advisory.
Correct.
Right. Well, I mean, most of, I mean, they do not have the authority to authorize any actions, the people that we're exempting.
Right.
They can only do research, do studies, gather information, make recommendations, but they can't.
Here's my concern.
Absolutely.
And I've talked with Dave today about this. We have created the CRCRC because of community debate that we had not engaged the community broadly enough to address these heightened building concerns. My concern is that if that committee is not subject to Open Meetings Act, that there won't be confidence in the product it produces. And so, in my view, I would rather see that committee have the responsibility for gathering that comment, for synthesizing the wants and desires and opposition of our community into something that everyone understands where it came from, understands what the substance of it is, and has a full opportunity to participate. The issues, and I've talked with Dave about this, the issues that are causing delay are lack of quorum in some respects.
If you'll allow me, I'm going to go ahead and pull up agenda item number 11. Agenda item number 11 is now before you too, so continue on. Yes, ma'am.
I think in order for the community to have engagement in the process and trust in the result, we need to have that subject to Open Meetings Act. If there could be some changes that would enable the committee to meet over YouTube, maybe we can waive a provision of the Open Meetings Act that would allow those meetings to happen more regularly and more conveniently. But I'd rather do some kind of targeted approach and have committed to Dave to work with him to do that and bring it back on next month's agenda. But I came to the legal profession as a result of the Sharpstown scandal. That was the scandal that resulted in the Open Meetings Act and in the Public Information Act. And I think if we do it and if our committees do it, we're all better off following those rules. It's a pain at times, but I think we can find a way to get meetings noticed more quickly and to perhaps have a a limited exception for a committee to exempt it from the attendance requirements of the Open Meetings Act so they can meet using YouTube. But I want to work with that and come back next month with something more tailored. So I would be a no vote tonight if we had to vote, and my recommendation would be that we postpone action on this item until the next meeting.
Okay. So you do have a motion and a second before you, I believe.
And I also know it's important to Councilmember Glasheen, and so I didn't want to have a vote with him being absent,
Okay.
even though he may vote the other way.
I would
think
almost
that's fair.
guarantee that.
I think it's important to see if we can get some consensus on it.
And I'll just say for the record, I do think that I pulled up agenda item number 10 and an 11 together here for your consideration. I will say there is a significant difference between the two because just for the record, 10 is simply giving the council the authority to, at some future date, whether it be tonight or at some future date, to allow this type of exception. I don't see any harm in allowing that. It would be probably a different discussion on a case-by-case basis if you were to do that. But as Counselor has pointed out, there's no requirement, so I don't see the need to tie the council's hands with relation to that. But I do think that is substantively a different discussion than the one you've just laid out related to agenda item number 11. With that said, I'm happy to, we do need to dispose of the motion in the second that's on the table, unless the motion is withdrawn. We do have to dispose of it, so we either vote, it's either withdrawn or it's voted.
So Brooke, are you opposed to making the amendment that would allow us to grant an exception, or you just don't want to pass anything right now?
I don't want to pass anything right now.
Okay. Well, I'm fine coming back with it next month. But I appreciate the concerns that the committee has brought to our attention because it's limiting their ability to get things done, and, you know, TikTok. Meanwhile, the pace of reconstruction is not slowing, and we're just creating more problems.
I've been the strongest advocate of getting moving on height restrictions of anyone here.
No, nobody is doubting any of that.
Yeah.
When I'm still back on the point of, to Ms. Nyer's point, people are being hurt in the interim.
Right.
We provided multiple opportunities for the citizenry to get involved, to show up to the meetings, to move forward. The CRCRC is purely advisory, allowing them to move with a degree, and they're going to put things forward. Ultimately, the decisions that are made that impact any of our code or whatever is going to come back on the city council. And I have absolutely no illusions that there aren't going to be people who object and say they weren't heard and all of those sorts of things when those go through, if they don't agree with every single point on that. But I think that's part of leadership, and that's part of taking the heat when it comes down to it, to protect the greater good. And that's what, hopefully, I think that's what the voters put us here to do, and that's what I intend to do. And I think allowing the CRC, they're going to bring everything forward to the community. The community can continue to get involved or not get involved and object and talk, but allowing them to meet and to move things forward more quickly, I think, is totally appropriate and prudent. So, that's all I
I'll
got.
just go back that we've had people, we did the commercial, they were able to do it. There are people that can run these things and do it in a manner that's consistent with the Texas Open Meetings Act. That's where I stand on it. So, I mean.
But you know, if you're worried about somebody going crazy on the commercial, ultimately that comes down to the voters having enough sense to have people on the city council who are not going to do things that are opposed to the will of the community.
I
Well,
just think-
The other issue is that the Open Meetings Act has issues on quorum, and there were a lot more people on the strike force. So the number of people that could meet without violating the Open Meetings Act was a lot greater.
then
And I think probably 90% of the work that was done on that committee was done by Brooke and Ryan Clinton and Tom Farrell. Right.
So get more
And-
people. Let's get more people on it. Like, why don't we do that?
Because that this slows down the process even
Okay.
more, and then
That's,
to Phil's point, we're not getting things done.
that's another issue. I don't know what that is, but it has nothing to do with the Texas Open Meetings Act.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, it does.
That's an excuse.
Okay, council, I will take comment from the public. Mr. Bench, would you like to identify yourself? Sure.
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph Place.
Are you testifying
um,
on item number 10 or item number 11?
I would wonder if I could even get 12 up. Is that possible?
And no, sir, not at this time.
Can't do it. Can't do it. Okay. I can only speak to this, that we have been hamstrung by the Open Meetings Act and CRCRC. I testified to this point last city council meeting. We would love to have a quorum. We currently have 5 members. We have a number of people waiting to be appointed to, we have 2 people to be waiting to be appointed to the CRCRC. But we can't review them in our open meeting because we can't get a quorum together for next Tuesday's meeting. So a meeting will go by where we don't get to review adding people to our meeting because we don't have a quorum. We're not, there's even, I think, some misunderstanding about what happens in meetings on Open Meetings Act is that if we don't have a quorum, we're not allowed to meet at all. We can't do anything. We can't even sit in the chair.
I volunteer here, and I make it to every meeting. I think the people that are on it need to be committed to showing up to every meeting. You know, if you do it, if you sign up to do it, you have to be there. So I don't buy the quorum thing.
So
Like, I
some-
haven't missed one yet.
Sometimes people have health things that come up,
Okay.
and that prevents them from being able to do
Let's
that.
get more people on it.
Well, he's just saying they're trying to get more people on it, and they can't because
we can appoint more people to it.
we asked them to give us a recommendation.
Right.
And they have to have a meeting in order to provide us with a recommendation.
We're so close, but we can't get there. And right now, as it is, with our situation, with one member only being able to Zoom in, and that not counting as part of a quorum, one member is Zooming in, that means that everybody else who doesn't have to Zoom in has to be there at the meeting. So if we're missing one member, we don't get a quorum.
I say we change it and don't ask them for someone, and we come up with another person to appoint. And instead of that, do that.
These are the kinds of things I think need to be worked out and brought back to the council.
Well, here, I just want to say one thing, that either you make a change to the ordinance as it is, or if you say, well, we're going to tweak it a little bit, you've effectively made a change to the ordinance. So it all becomes, and I think, back to Councilperson Hudson here, I think properly governed, properly managed, with the proper sideboards on it, we can pull this off, get the proper public view, get the visibility that is required, demanded. And we're not going to make everybody happy, but we'll make most people happy. And most is my job, in my view. Most is what I'm trying to get to. I'm not going to get everybody. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Bench. With that, so two options. The question will occur on agenda item number 10, or the item will be withdrawn.
So call the question.
Okay, the question occurs on agenda item number 10. The motion before you is to approve the ordinance as presented. We will do a roll call vote. Ms. Brown?
Nope.
Mr. Robinson?
No.
Mr. McDuffie?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Reading 3 ayes, no nays, motion carries. With that, we will move on to agenda item number 11. And it is already before you. Is there a motion on agenda item number 11?
We don't really know what we're being asked to do, what this item is supposed to be covering.
Yeah.
Want to bring that one back for further
Well, we
consideration or not? Or, I mean, based on your conversation earlier, you would prefer to have some parameters around anytime this.
I would, and I think that sounds like what Brooke was talking about doing with
Yes.
Dave, and so I think that would allow us to take action on it next month if we get something
Correct.
put
Yes.
together between now and then.
Okay, then I will move on. Mr. Bench?
Yeah, okay. Dave Bench, 1 Rollingwood, or 1 Randolph Place. This doesn't have to be handled immediately. You know, the heavy lifting hasn't started yet. It will soon. If you would allow me to bring back some sideboards that you all could have a look at and decide whether or not it's appropriate to go forward with this motion, I think that would be, would you be okay with that?
No, I
I'll
think
draw
that's
up something that you can, put your arms around and decide whether or not it makes sense or not. And if it doesn't, then we'll figure out a different way.
So are you talking about what you and Brooke have already talked about putting together?
Well, we
Or
didn't quite
something?
finish the sentence, I don't think.
Okay.
I think we got started on it, but more discussion is required. And I plan to speak with Brooke a little bit longer about it.
Okay.
But what those sideboards are, I think, are important. And I think that's what you're asking for. What are you voting for here? Okay, well, I think you would deserve a little more definition.
Right, well, because right now, there's no,
There's no there.
there's.
We talked about it last council meeting, but I don't think it all got written down. So why don't I put it together into something that you can look at and say, yeah, maybe, maybe not.
Right,
Okay?
right,
Thank you.
okay.
So, because council, how I will leave this, unless you tell me otherwise right now, I will not place this back on the agenda unless one of you ask for it to be placed back on the agenda. So have your discussions with, pick your friend, and all of you can talk to Dave. But unless someone asks for it to be back on the agenda, it will not be back on the agenda.
I'm good with that.
Understood.
Okay. All right, thank you, council. With that, we'll move off of agenda item number 11, move on to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action regarding a CRCRC progress report and potential request for appropriations. And I believe this is Ms. Brown's agenda item to open up.
I put this on for Mr. Bench, and Mr. Bench will make a presentation.
Mr. Bench, you are recognized. Please identify yourself. You are on agenda item number 12.
Okay, I wish I had more to tell you, but it has been difficult for us to get together. We have approved our survey to the extent that it is ready to go be ported into some sort of a system so that we can distribute it out to the community. I've put 2 RFQs out to 2 companies and have gotten a quote back from one of them. I had hoped to be able to ask for some sort of appropriation to allow us to go forward, or you would tell us no, and that we have to find a different way to distribute the survey outside of using the technologies that were used for the comprehensive plan. The one quote that I have right now can go as high as $15,000. So I'm trying to save money. I'm trying to do this as cheaply as we can, and I don't think we're really ready to talk about it yet. Other than that, I've interviewed a number of people who are interested in participating in the CRCRC, And I think you're going to be pleased with the list that we'll bring you next meeting, so that you can, with our recommendations to appoint. And that's
Great.
all I have.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Council, any actions to be taken on agenda item number 12? Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 13, update and discussion regarding park sprinkler improvement, system improvements. I know Phil has been up there watering and watching the water
Yes.
burning up in the 106-degree temperatures.
Well, the upside of our current climate is it's real easy to see where our sprinkler system is inadequate. And on 3, 4, and 5, we've been supplementing that with a makeshift controller that allows us to control 4 different zones. And I've been moving sprinklers around. That's why 3, 4, and 5 look better. Bottom line is, we have an underground sprinkler system. It's inadequate. We met with the sprinkler expert from the city of Austin, who got glowing recommendations from everyone. And what we requested from him was to basically give us an estimate of what it would cost to study our system and to make recommendations and to basically spec out what we need to actually get coverage in the entire park. I think the lower park looks pretty good, partly because we have a lot more shade down there, probably. He has done that. It came in today. His estimate to create a study that doesn't fix the problem but puts parameters around what the problem is has come in at $2,125. So I think it might be a good idea for us to approve a budget item for that, and maybe a little bit more, not to exceed a certain amount if we can get that done. And that way we can get the study done and start moving forward. Then they'll be coming back. Also, we're potentially looking to try to get some funds out of RCDC to help make some of these improvements. That's been an ongoing discussion. So that's where we're at.
Well, thank you for staying on top of it. Council, you have questions for Phil?
Good work.
Thank you for taking care of it.
Well, it's not taken care of.
Well,
That's the
you're
point.
making progress. You're making progress.
And we, not to, I mean, I'm supportive of what you're trying to do, and I think we've had a significant expenditure. We can't let it go to waste because we can't water it. We have, I think, tripled our expenditure on water. Right now, obviously, we're in the, literally, no pun intended, the heat of it. So that should get better as the weather breaks a little bit. But
I did notice the sprinklers were running as I was driving up here today before 6 o'clock,
yeah.
which is not
We'll
in accordance with our watering restrictions. But
Well, it is while we're trying to get the new grass established. That's why and it's probably the auxiliary system you were seeing rather than the in-ground sprinklers. What we're hoping to do is get the in-ground sprinklers to where it actually provides coverage. Right now, if you look
Sure.
at fields 1 and 2, there are brown spots. Hopefully that's just gone dormant, but that would be happening even worse over on 3, 4, and 5 if we weren't doing the auxiliary watering. And that's what we're trying to that's what we're trying to get, is a sprinkler system that actually gives us the appropriate amount of coverage, doesn't waste water where it need not be, and
get it fixed once and for all. I know before Izzy and these guys have been working hard on it, but even before that, the sprinkler system has been an ongoing problem
we had lots
that
of
we've
leaks
never been
in
able to
it.
get our arms around and never get fixed, and we're hoping to do it once and for all. That's the goal.
Okay. All right, thank you again, Phil. Bring back whatever we need to look at for council next month, if you
Okay.
would.
Okay.
And with that, we will move on to agenda item number 14, update on the Pleasant Nixon Drainage Project. I think Ashley and I have some updates for you, but this is Sarah's agenda item, so I'll let you open.
Just, again, with the questions from the community, and we haven't heard anything in months, so.
I've got some good news to report, and I'll let Ashley jump in as well. First of all, I'd like to thank her. I'd like to thank the neighbors. I'd like to thank Charlie's firm for quick turnaround. We've been so the phase we're in right now, as you know, is really trying to fine tune and get the easement drafts nailed down. We have after the last council meeting, all of those easements went to the neighbors for them to digest and make comment on. They did, and they all came back in, or the 3 of them came back in, 2 of which had some substantial suggested, requested changes and edits to the easement documents. After spending a great deal of time, Ashley and myself, trying to sort of have them all out and sort through where we landed was, we ended up pulling together, Ashley and I spent many hours pulling together in a side-by-side. Brooke mentioned the legislature earlier. It's something akin to a conference committee report where we lined up the original draft easement language that the city had provided, and then we compiled each homeowner's draft into its own column so that we could see them all side by side. And then we attempted to adjust the differences between the 3 because the real problem that, well, first of all, legal counsel has advised us that it's really in our best interest to try to keep the easements as similar as possible and not have 3 randomly different versions that we're trying to keep up with and remember and track over time and that sort of thing. So to the extent possible, we need to try to keep them as consistent as we can. So in an effort to try to do that, we wanted to try to keep as much of the requested changes from each of the homeowners that we could, while still offering that same treatment to the other 2, right? So if one person asks for something, that's great, that's what they would like to see, but it's not fair or equitable to not then offer that same treatment to the other 2. So we tried to adjust those differences and keep the language that was most important to each person and roll it into a final compromise version. Ashley and I worked on that. I worked on that for many, many hours trying to get that language right. And that culminated in sort of a final column that was sort of the final draft compromise language that we then sent back. We had to run some traps with legal. That went back to the homeowners, and we have. I'm going to call it agreement on 2 out of the 3, and we got just today, in fact, the final round of requested edits to the compromise draft from one of the homeowners, and I took a look at it this afternoon before I came to the council meeting. I think it's in the ballpark. I think it's something we can work with and massage, and if not, just accept. So I plan on doing that probably tomorrow. I'll probably do that tomorrow, maybe Friday, depending on my schedule, and get that back out. I've explained to them, for clarity's sake, that the goal here is to reach agreement, but not signature, right? Because there are still, another important part of this. We did get with K-Freeze. The final iteration, the final changes that have been accepted, it's not a huge cost, but it's a cost, right? And so I explained to the neighbors, I really don't want to sign off on that expenditure to fine tune the final, to change the final levers on that language, on the plans and the engineering and the landscape plans until we have basic agreement. I think we have basic agreement from 2 out of the 3. I think we will have the third here within the next day or so, at which point we will have agreement, but not signature. And then I'll go ahead and sign off and ask K-Freeze to do the final adjustments that we know that each one of the 3 want to see in the plans, including an exhibit that's going to get included with the easements. At which point, I think we're there and can get final signatures and be ready to go. And I believe that with that, we should be on a time frame to try to get this. I need to check this with K-Freeze, but I would hope that we can move this into the same category of bid timeline as we do the bonds, that would hopefully be within the next 30, 45 days. So that's the update.
Thank you.
Significant progress. Don't want to jinx anything, but I think we're close.
We've heard that before.
Yes, we have, and Kevin Shell is saying the same thing, just
I'm
a
speaking
few blocks
for him.
away. That's right. So that is the update. Any other questions, comments? All right. With that, we will move off of agenda item number 14, move on to agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action regarding the permanent appointment of a police chief. Council, I'll kind of open this up, and then I'll ask council to go with me to executive session. But this is pretty straightforward agenda item. About a year ago tonight, this council took action to make an interim appointment of police chief of Crystal, and she's done a very nice job. There are things we need to discuss related to the legal actions that you take and that sort of thing from this dais, and we can do that in executive, but that's why this is on here. It's really for no other reason than council took a temporary action about a year ago, and it has now expired, so it's time for us to at least have a conversation about it. So that's why it's here. And with that, we can go to executive. Is there... Oh, I'm sorry. I always forget this part. As authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council will adjourn into executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code 551.074 regarding the discussion of personnel matters. What time is it?
8:39.
At 8:39. Okay, the Rollingwood City Council will reconvene at 8:50, coming out of executive session. No action was taken in executive session, and we were back in regular session, 8:51. Council, we are back on agenda item number 15, discussion of possible action regarding the permanent appointment of a police chief. I'm open to take any motions.
Mr. Mayor, I move we appoint Crystal Munoz as police chief for the city of Rollingwood, Texas.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Is further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Congratulations, Chief.
I look forward to working with each of y'all.
Welcome back aboard. Board officially, something like that. All right, thank you for all your hard work, Chief. I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you, council, and with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. McDuffie. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion